Here's what's coming up on today's show.
Nothing is certain in life except death and taxes, and changes in taxes. Yes, tax law has changed once again with the passage of the retirement bill known as the Secure Act 2.0. This new law provides many potential planning opportunities for retirees. So today, Mark and I will talk about some key changes that you need to know that may impact your retirement plan.
It's easy to get lost on the way to retirement. Things like taxes, improper planning, and excessive market risk can all lead you astray from your goal of a successful and happy retirement. That's where Liz Whittaberry comes in. She's a holistic financial advisor and the founder of Best Path Advisors, and she can help guide you to a better financial path. This is Retire on Your Best Path with Liz Whittaberry.
It's time once again for another edition of the podcast, Retire on Your Best Path with Liz Whittaberry and myself to talk investing, finance, and retirement. And as Liz teed up there, we are going to spend some time today on the passage of the Secure Act 2.0, the Setting Every Community Up for Retirement Enhancement Act. That's a mouthful. We're going to talk about that today on the podcast. Liz, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Doing pretty good. Hope everybody had a good holiday and enjoyed themselves, and because we are into the new year. And, you know, Liz, we were talking, we had plans to do a different podcast for this first episode into the new year, but this this passage changed all that. So we're going to have some conversation around this today.
Absolutely. And then we'll come back and talk about that other topic next time, which will be market outlook for 2023. But, this is really important because in my planning, I help people minimize taxes. So this is a really important topic to me and to my clients. So I think we want to get this information out there as soon as possible.
Yeah, well, let's jump into it here. Although I looked up real fast when you were setting us up here with the Ben Franklin quote, because that was the death and taxes thing, was Ben Franklin, right? So he said, I think it was, the full quote says, "Our new Constitution is now established. Everything seems promised it will be durable, but in this world, nothing is certain except death and taxes." And 200 plus years later, that still rings true. So, as you said, let's the only thing, they constantly like to tinker with this stuff, and so they've done some interesting things in here. So I want to get your take on it and have you break it down for us a little bit. There's a ton of stuff in here, so we're probably not going to be able to cover everything. So let's start with really the high level, impactful things that most of our listening audience would be. As I mentioned, what the Secure Act stood for earlier, the name of it. What is the Secure Act 2.0? Let's start there.
Yeah, you had mentioned what the acronym stands for, Setting Every Community Up for Retirement Enhancement Act, and I don't know who comes up with these acronyms.
I want that job. They had the CARES Act, and somebody's got they're like the czar of names. So,
They do a good job, but, the original Secure Act was also passed over the Christmas break. Mm-hmm. It was passed in December of 2019, and it brought a very wide range of changes. It eliminated age limits for contributing to a traditional IRA, moved that RMD, required minimum distribution age, from 70 and a half to 72. Thankfully, they dropped the half because that was just confusing. It caused the death of the stretch IRA, and that was a really big deal for everybody. And then it significantly limited the use of conduit trusts to hold an inherited IRA. So a lot of trust planning, estate planning had to be changed. 3 years later, and they passed this Secure Act 2.0. And thankfully, it doesn't have some of those bigger impactful things that are as painful as the loss of the stretch IRA or having to, change your estate plan. But it's got a lot of smaller changes that are going to touch more people. Mm-hmm. And so that's, really what we want to talk about. What are those things?
Yeah, they tucked them in at the end of the closing of the year, right? They both were kind of smuggled in, for lack of a better term. I think this one, it was in the omnibus thing, right? That big old $1.7 trillion thing. So they kind of tuck them in, and then they're kind of like, here, we made these changes, and you have 3 days to figure it out and start moving from there. And of course, there's a lot of these things have different timelines when they're going to kick in. So let's brush up on some of that stuff. And of course, for folks, they don't have to necessarily panic. This doesn't change anything for them today, but it's good information for them to be aware of. And obviously for someone like yourself who's helping them in that process. And you and I were talking again before the podcast that there's just a ton of stuff to cover. So let's go with some main categories. Give me a few that you think are going to be most critical for folks.
Well, in this Secure Act 2.0, they've changed the required minimum distribution age again. They've pushed that out even further. We're living longer. We're getting to start those required minimum distributions later. They have increased our access to Roth accounts, and high wage earners are going to be required to use the Roth option for their catch-up contribution. Congress is really demonstrating they like the Roth with its you have to pay the tax now to get the money in there.
Sure, yeah.
And they're always very focused on this year, this cycle. So they're not thinking about that tax-free later, but that's good for people saving. They are increasing the catch-up contribution limits, and they're including for the very first time, IRA catch-up contributions will be indexed for inflation. That's just been a flat. It was originally $500 for a very long time, and then they doubled it to $1,000 for the IRA catch-up contribution, and now they're going to start indexing that for inflation. So that'll help people that don't have a 401k option. And then they have added more access to retirement funds in times of need, like if someone has a terminal illness or a public safety worker is retiring at age 50, your firefighters, and they've expanded the definition of that. So, all of those are good things.
Yeah, and like anything, I think with a lot of our government bills, right? There's stuff in there that has the we're doing this for you, but it's also for them because they want the funds, right? To your point about the Roth accounts. So how are the RMDs changed? Because that is obviously a big one. Many times, finance people getting close to retirement, retirees, pre-retirees, they're like, hey, I know we got to do these RMDs. I don't always need the money, right? So sometimes it's kind of a sticking point for folks. So how has that changed? What's that situation going to look like?
Last year, the RMD age was 72. So anyone who turned 72 last year had to start their RMDs. This year, anyone who turns 72 is not going to have to, because they have now changed it to 73. Mm-hmm. So everybody that's turning 72 this year gets one more year.
So to clarify, I'm sorry, Liz, let me clarify.
Yes.
So turning 72 this year in 2023, you're allowed to punt until next year, correct?
Yeah. Okay. Get one more year. If you don't need it, you can leave it. If you're doing other planning, you can continue doing other planning.
Gotcha. They're not waving it across the board just for those folks that are turning 72 this year. That would
then it'll be 70. So they've increased it to 73, and anybody that is not yet 72 on December 31 of last year, they're going to now have an age 73, all the way up to those people that are born in 1960 or later. Those folks will actually have an RMD age of 75.
Okay.
Now, that'll be 10 years from now when they would be turning 73. Mm-hmm. Okay. So if you're born in 1960 or later, you wouldn't be 73 until 2033. So that's a full 10 years away. And the reason for that is they're always doing a 10-year budget reconciliation. So to move that another 2 years out to age 75, they can work that into their 10-year budget reconciliation by making that be for people that are born in 1960 or over. But what that means is if you're of that age, which I am and you are, that our required minimum distribution age will be age 75. The thing that this does for people in moving the required minimum distribution age out, if they don't need to take the funds, if they don't need to live on those funds, then it gives another 2 years. There's a period of time when people retire and they're no longer earning their salary, they're no longer bringing in those wages up until required minimum distribution age, when they have to start taking those required minimum distributions. That period of time in between is what we call the gap years. Mm-hmm. And that's a period of time that the tax rate typically drops to the lowest bracket for a lot of people. Even your highest earners, they can pull money from already tax paid money. They're not starting Social Security a lot of times until age 70. There's very little taxable income coming in. And in that gap year period, there's the opportunity to do some planning. There's the opportunity to shift some money from your tax deferred accounts to your tax-free accounts, to use other strategies to get, maybe do some tax gain harvesting in the 0% bracket and reset some the tax basis for assets in some of the different accounts. So there's some benefit to having more time to do that planning. It gives us another year for the people that are born before 1960, and another 2 years for anyone born after 1960. That much more time in making some strategic changes to the portfolio in order to set them up to have less taxes in the future.
Okay. So again, the big takeaway is if you're born after 1960, your RMD age will be 75, and if not, it's 73.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
You were mentioning earlier how annoying that 70 and a half used to be. I noticed that they didn't move the QCD thing. Like, it's still 70 and a half. It's like, it's so funny how it's like, really, you couldn't have just made it even. You could have just made it all match. But I guess in some ways, if you're charitable minded, I guess that's still nice, right? You could do that a little sooner if you wanted to. That gives you some other planning options as well.
It does. And so that is definitely a benefit, that they're not tying it to the required minimum distribution age. Mm-hmm. It was actually written in the code originally with the age stated. And a lot of times they'll reference another piece of the act so that when that piece changes, it affects everything else that's linked to that. But with the qualified charitable distribution, they actually put the age in at that time, and they set it at what was at that time the required minimum distribution age. But they have fortunately not increased that age, and that does give people some additional room to do some planning that can be very, very beneficial. Yeah,
especially again if you're charitably minded, right? So it gives you a way to start thinking about some if you don't want or need the money. So let's get into some more things here. So the high wage earners that you mentioned will have to use this Roth option in the catch-up phase. The catch-up phase, obviously, explain that for us. What is that catch-up contribution phase? Who might this affect? And what will that kind of impact on retirement strategizing?
Yeah, you bet. So the regular contribution to a 401k, and that's what we're talking about here. The regular contribution is now going to be $22,500. It's up from $20,500. And for anybody that's age 50 and above, they have the ability to do a catch-up contribution. And that is, once they've maxed out that regular contribution, they can put in additional money. That's now going to be $7,500. It's up from $6,500 last year.
That's $30,000.
Yeah, so they can get a good chunk of money into their 401k or 403b or 457 or whatever employer retirement plan that they have.
Gotcha.
Now, the issue is going to be that starting next year in 2024, if someone is a high wage earner, meaning they make more than $145,000 of W-2 wages, that person is required by the law to use the Roth option for their catch-up.
Oh, okay. So that extra, let's say that extra $7,500 you were just talking about, that would have to go into a Roth account.
That would have to go into the Roth option within the plan, which means your plan has to have the Roth option as a part of it. So if your employer does not have that, you'll want to, petition for that to happen. And I think they'll, obviously be adding that to the plans that don't have the Roth. A lot of plans do these days, but still not all. I still see plans that don't have that as an option.
Okay.
But those Roth contributions are made with after-tax money.
Right, because you pay the taxes going in, yeah.
Yeah, so if, let's say Sally's been putting the full contribution amount and the full catch-up, and she's been putting all of that in her traditional tax-deferred option because she's been wanting to save taxes currently. Mm-hmm. If she is this high wage earner, then she's going to be forced to put the catch-up into the Roth portion, which means that now becomes taxable to her. So this change could impact the current taxes that people pay. It would increase her income taxes once she started putting her catch-up into the Roth option, and anybody else that's in that situation. Now, I don't really see that as a bad thing. I know that when Sally retires, she's going to want some tax diversification. She's going to want some money in a tax-free bucket, some money in the tax-deferred bucket, some money in the taxable bucket. And a lot of times people, when they're working, they're not really thinking about what they're going to want after they're retired and how they're going to want that tax diversification. They're thinking, how can I save as much taxes as possible. Now I want, I'm earning this money. I want to pay as little in taxes as possible. Then when they retire, they often fall into this situation where the only way to get money out of their accounts is to pay, ordinary income taxes on it, which is the highest bracket. So this change will actually force people to do something that's good for them.
That's good.
In the long term. But it is going to be, possibly a bit of a difference for some people. Now, another interesting thing on the catch-up contributions is that starting in 2025, there's going to be a bigger limit for anybody that's 60, 61, 62, and 63.
Oh, okay. They're going to kick it up another notch.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know why they didn't just go ahead and extend that to 65 or
Right.
I'm not quite sure why it's only those 4 years, but it is. I think it should just be anyone 60 and above.
Right.
It's
that would make sense and make it easy, but since when do they do that, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
But that is going to be a 10,000 catch-up contribution or 150% of the catch-up contribution in 2024, which would actually be a little bit more than 10,000.
So it does
Again,
give you the opportunity really to, if you are behind, which many people feel like they are when they first go sit down with a professional like yourself, most people come in saying, hey, give it to me straight. I feel like I'm probably, I'm not ready for retirement. So, and that's the whole point of catch-up contributions is to really sock more away.
Yes. And people are at a point, even if they have enough saved, they're at a point where, the kids are
right.
likely grown, likely gone, college is likely paid, and they're looking at ways to get money into a good bucket for retirement. They have the ability to do it now.
Yep.
And they're running up against these limits and saying, well, what else can I do over and above this? So having this extra room is going to be good. Now, those high wage earners, they're still going to have to contribute those bigger amounts to their Roth.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah. So that's just something that they'll have to be mindful of. But still, to be able to get that much into a Roth, because I'm talking to a lot of people about how to get money moved over to the Roth. So this is a benefit, in my opinion.
Nice. Okay. What else is in the Act? So, I mean, obviously there's always caveats, right? There's caveats for everything that they do, and there's little nuances here and there, which is why you should always check with your financial professional before you just, take any action. But what's in there that might be kind of across the board for everybody?
Well, something that I am very happy to see is the change in the penalty for required minimum distributions.
Mm-hmm.
The penalty for not taking your required minimum distribution on time when you should have is the biggest penalty that we have under the tax code. And it was 50% of your required minimum distribution.
Yeah. Huge.
So
right.
If you were supposed to take out $10,000 for the year and you didn't take it out before December 31, you would have a $5,000 penalty. Now, you could petition if there were, good reasons that got missed, and you could ask for it to be waived. But now they have, effective immediately, they've just reduced that to 25%.
That's nice.
Which is, that's within, a lot of people are in that 20 to 24% tax bracket. So, that's nice that it's a 25% penalty. It can be further reduced to 10% if it's fixed within a correction window. And the correction window is a little confusing to me. I haven't really dug into exactly how the timing is going to work in real life, but it starts when the tax is assessed. So that would be like your due date. And then it ends on the earliest of when they mail a notice of deficiency, or they actually assess the tax, or 2 years after the time it's imposed. So like 2 years after your filing date. So that'll be interesting to see how that works out. But if you turn around and get it fixed pretty quickly, like you realize, oh, I forgot to take an RMD from this other account, or, I just turned my RMD age and I forgot that I was supposed to start this. This gives people the ability to quickly fix it, and it would just be a 10% penalty, which I like that.
Yeah, we were chatting. I was chatting with another person about this as well, and they were like, well, a lot of times they would waive that 50%. So it feels like this almost feels like hey, we're doing you a favor, but it's also at the same time another one of those kind of, we're probably going to hit you with the 10% more often. So just get it done and get it right the first time, right? So.
Yes, and they will still waive it, but this certainly makes it a lot easier.
Yeah. For sure. Yeah.
A lot less paperwork on both sides.
That's probably part of it too. A lot less paperwork. Anything that really surprised you? There's been a couple already. Was there one kind of, wow, I'm surprised they did that?
Yeah, they put in a provision for 529 plans that I thought was a really pleasant surprise. When people are they've got kids, they're trying to plan for retirement, and they're trying to plan for their kids' college, and they're trying to, balance that. There's always this, trade-off. Where do I put my money first or second? Well, the Act includes the ability to move money from a 529 plan, if that money is in the 529 plan, not needed for education, to move that to a Roth IRA.
Yeah, that's great, because it was just stuck, right? You put it in the 529, it had to go to education, but
yeah, or you took it out and paid the taxes on it,
right.
And if there was if the child got a scholarship, or the education was paid elsewhere, there was no tax penalty on that. If not, then you might end up with a 10% tax penalty. They do like those 10% tax penalties.
Yeah.
But in this case, if you get to the point where your child did get a scholarship, or you didn't need to use all of the funds, whatever the case may be, if that 529 plan has been in place for 15 years or more, so it has a pretty long time period that it has to be in place.
You've been funding it for, okay.
Yeah, it has to have been set up for 15 years.
Gotcha.
The funds can go from the 529 plan to a Roth IRA for that beneficiary. Now, you do have the ability to change beneficiaries on 529 plans. So we're waiting to see if that restarts the 15 years. We don't think so within the industry. We think that you'll be able to change that beneficiary and still make use of this for whoever the new beneficiary is named. Which would mean that you could change it back to yourself as the parent and move it into your Roth.
Oh, okay.
So I'm hopeful that is the true way that it's going to work. Now, the beneficiary does have to have compensation. The amount put in is limited to that year's IRA contribution limits. So if the max you could put into an IRA would be $7,000, then that would be the max that you could put into transfer over, and it would count as part of that year's contribution.
So they have to have earned income. They have to be working.
Yeah, whoever the beneficiary is.
Okay,
yes.
Gotcha.
And the maximum amount that can be transferred to one beneficiary is $35,000. But still, if you could take the money that's been put into a 529 plan and has grown without any tax, it's grown tax deferred, and instead of pulling it out and pay taxes on those earnings, move that over to a Roth IRA, that's a nice benefit. And that surprised me. And that does help people, I think about putting some more money into a 529 plan because they do have a little bit more options. What if we don't really need it for education? Well, there's some other options for some of the money that would be left over. So one thing that I will start telling people to do is get that clock ticking. If you think you're going to be saving to a 529 plan and you're not sure that, once you've saved it up, that it would all be used, just get that clock ticking, because at the end of 15 years, that money can be transferred to a Roth IRA.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, start the clock now. So
start the clock.
All right, fantastic. So yeah, definitely some interesting things in here. Now, as we said at the beginning, we're getting a little long here, so we're going to wrap it up. But there's so much stuff, we just can't cover it all in one session. So I'm sure we'll talk more about things as more information comes out and throughout the year. But is there anything else you'd like to add to kind of wrap this up in a bow for this week?
From my perspective, one of the good things is the things that it did not include. And that is, it didn't include the requirement for lump sum distributions from really big IRAs. So those that are over 10 million and over 20 million, those folks won't have to suddenly distribute the excess. And it also didn't reduce any access to Roth accounts. In fact, it expanded it. And there's been some concern, these Roth accounts are good for us. Are they going to limit our ability to get money into the Roth? Are they going to limit our ability to use the Roth? Is that going to become one of those frozen, we used to be able to do it aspects? And they didn't do that. In fact, they expanded the ability to use Roth IRAs, Roth 401ks, are actually mandating money with the high wage earners to go into Roth. So that's good news because the Roth account is a very big benefit, a gift really from the government to us to have this tax-free money in retirement.
Yeah, for sure. So definitely a lot of good stuff in there. And as you said, sometimes the extra things is what's not there. Anything else?
Yeah, I would say, whenever tax law changes, there's always a lot to it. And so This is a time to get some expert advice, to go back and look at your plan, make sure that everything is still set up the way that it should to work most efficiently and effectively for you in your unique situation. When I'm doing tax planning with my clients, when we strategically look at how we can make use of each and every year of tax planning opportunity, we can project that we're saving 25 to 30% or more over their lifetime. And that's huge. That's money that my clients get to keep. That's money that they get to spend on themselves and their children, as opposed to paying taxes that they really didn't have to pay because they didn't do the planning.
There you go. So it's all about being efficient, obviously, and that's why we talk about these things on the podcast. So as always, a lot to unpack with the Secure Act 2.0. So if you have some questions and concerns, certainly talk with your financial advisor. Reach out to Liz. You can find her online at bestpathadvisors.com. That's bestpathadvisors.com because Liz wants you to retire on your best path, which is the name of the podcast, and you can subscribe to us on whatever platform you like, Apple, Google, Spotify. You can type that in at the search box of any of those apps, like Apple. Just type in Retire on Your Best Path, or you can find all the information at bestpathadvisors.com. Liz, thanks for hanging out. Any final words before we go?
I'd just like to say thank you for tuning in today, because we're here to help you be on your best path.
And we'll catch you next time here on the podcast with Liz Whittaberry, founder and financial advisor at Best Path Advisors.
The preceding program is sponsored by Best Path Advisors, which is solely responsible for its content. Securities offered through J.W. Cole Financial, member FINRA SIPC. Investment advice offered through J.W. Cole Advisors. Best Path Advisors, J.W. Cole Financial, and J.W. Cole Advisors are unaffiliated entities. The opinions expressed by Liz Whittaberry should not be construed as specific tax, legal, or investment advice, nor as an offer to buy or sell any securities mentioned herein. Neither J.W. Cole Financial nor its representatives provide legal, tax, or accounting advice. Persons who provide such advice do so in a capacity other than as a registered representative of J.W. Cole. Investing is subject to risks, including the loss of principal. Due to volatility within the markets mentioned, opinions are subject to change without notice. Information is based on sources believed to be reliable, however, their accuracy or completeness cannot be guaranteed.